staying in class.
Okay. So of course, today is the 2nd of Tammuz, which makes Shabbos tomorrow, the 3rd of Tammuz, 25th Yortzeit of the Rebbe. Everybody's talking about it, everybody knows about it. So, if I wanted to talk about who the Rebbe is, I could say 1,000 things, but I thought it would be interesting to talk about the Rebbe in his own words. Now, it's not easy to do that because the Rebbe did not talk a lot about himself. Very, very little. Didn't talk a lot about his own accomplishments, and certainly didn't talk about his own personality. I did find, they're not new to me, I'm not like I found them, but there are 3 known, or that I have available, times the Rebbe did talk about himself, not just things he did, but about himself, who he is, and you'll see, I'll give you the context as to how each of these things were said and what they are. And I think these 3 little snippets will give you a very interesting insight into who the Rebbe is. The first is from a letter that the Rebbe wrote to the then president of the state of Israel. His name was Yitzchak ben Tzvi. Yitzchak ben Tzvi is one of the presidents of Israel. He's a big academic, scholar, historian, learned a lot. And the letter opens up with, there's no title. It doesn't say like it's addressed to so-and-so. It doesn't say, Dear Mr. President of Israel. It doesn't say that. And you'll see in a moment why that's critical. But the letter opens up with, the Rebbe writes, I was pleasantly surprised to have received your letter in which you acknowledge having received a book that was recently published by Chabad at that time, which was the Tzemach Tzedek, the 3rd Chabad Rebbe's commentary to tractate Baba Metzia. And the Rebbe writes to him, and I was also happy to hear about a class you guys are conducting in tractate Baba Metzia. And earlier, in the same volume of letters, there's a letter to Shazar where the Rebbe makes note of the same class. So apparently, Shazar, I guess, wasn't president. Maybe he was president before, maybe he was president after. I'm not sure. I don't know the history of the presidents of Israel, but he wasn't president at the time. Yitzchak ben Tzvi was, but apparently they had a class in Baba Metzia. And I guess this somehow the book of commentary from Tzemach Tzedek accompanied that class. That's what it seems like. And then the Rebbe goes on to tell him, Yitzchak ben Tzvi, about the famous statement of our sages, Rebbe Mechabed Ashirim, that Rebbe honored those who were wealthy. And many commentaries have the question, why is he honoring the wealthy? He doesn't say he's honoring those who give charities. He's honoring the wealthy. Why? And Rebbe explains, this is something they've talked about a number of times, that if he was given that gift, it's because God trusts him with the gift of wealth to do the right thing. So even if he doesn't do the right thing, because he has the Yetzer Hara, like everybody else has free choice and everybody else has an evil inclination, so he's not being as successful in using the gift he had, but by the very fact that God trusts him with the gift means he's worthy of trust, etc. And therefore the Rebbe tells him, Yitzchak ben Tzvi, you have the gift of scholarship, of influence, and therefore you should use it out in a good way to promote Torah to Judaism, etc. And the Rebbe concludes the letter with, I'm relying on what I heard about you and your personality, and I'm very hopeful that you won't begrudge me for these lines in which the Rebbe is telling him that he should use his influence positivity, especially considering the fact that this is the first letter I'm ever writing you. Like the first time that was ever writing to him, that was giving him like Musar almost. So the Rebbe is saying, like, hearing what I've heard about you, I think you're going to be okay, and hopefully you'll receive it with the same sentiment that it was written. And then the Rebbe writes as follows. Now, perhaps the following lines I should have read at the beginning of the letter, but I'm writing it now. And I'm explaining to you why I didn't write your title in the letter. Why I didn't address you as Dear Mr. President, da-da-da-da-da. Nasi is the word in Hebrew for president. Nasi also means prince. So the Rebbe writes like this, and here the Rebbe talks about himself. This is him describing himself in his earliest stages in childhood. I don't know that he described himself any time earlier than that. Miyom holchi l'cheder. From the day I went to cheder, the day I've been taken into cheder, which is school for yeshiva, for good Jewish boy. How does a boy when he goes to cheder?
Goes to jail.
Cheder literally means a room. So in Yiddish, they use it as a euphemism to mean you're sitting in a room, sitting in jail. But cheder literally means a room, and it's used to describe going to school. From the day I went to Cheder as a child. How old is a child when he goes to Cheder?
5, 6.
3, 4, younger, maybe. I would say that was even younger, but let's say it's 5, 6. And even before that, says the Rebbe. From the day I went to Cheder and even before that. I started to conjure up in my imagination, tzir, the image, geula asida, of the future redemption. So the first known thing that we know about the Rebbe describing about himself as a childhood was that even before he went to Cheder, he started to conjure up the image of Mashiach's coming. And then he goes to say that this is the image of this redemption that I've had is a redemption that's complete, in which no Jews suffer. And part of that image is that there's going to be a Nasi, a prince or president, who is the king of Mashiach. And therefore, it's hard for me to use the language Nasi for someone who's supposed to be a Nasi presiding over Israel, when at a time that he's not fully fulfilling the role of what a Nasi should be, who is the king Mashiach. And therefore I'm respectfully refraining from using the term Nasi for you, and then we conclude by saying, knowing who you are, that you're a straight shooter, I hope you'll accept it okay. So this is the first known thing that he talks about himself at such a young age, that he started to envision Mashiach's coming. So just a little commentary on this. Whenever thinking of the image of Mashiach's coming at a young age, okay, so it's likely my young child's doing the same thing. You go to school, you hear about Mashiach, and so the kid's imagining. But Rebbe writes this letter when he's now 60-something years old.
Still waiting.
That's the point. It's not as if like the same simple 3-year-old faith in Mashiach's coming that a child has before he even goes to Cheder. It's the same one that drives the Rebbe's decisions as an adult. Didn't change. Not like when I was a child I imagined the image, and now I'm a little older, I got smarter, I'm thinking about other things. Still in Tavshin Tezayin. There was already Rebbe, he's 60-something years old, he's gone through whatever he's gone through and running away from the Nazis and going to Europe and there's all the rest of that. He's still driven by that same image of Mashiach's coming. It's one incredible thing that he talks about himself. The second is from Hayom Yom. So Hayom Yom, as you all know, is a book that the previous Rebbe instructed the Rebbe to do. The previous Rebbe instructed the Rebbe to make a calendar in which every day it's going to include the daily regiment of learning. So every day Hayom Yom opens up with daily regiment of Chumash is these verses, daily regiment of Tanya, Tehillim. And the previous Rebbe's instruction to the Rebbe was that the calendar should have customs for Chabad and little insights, and that's what Hayom Yom is. It's a collection of insights. Interestingly, the previous Rebbe's letter, which is printed in the beginning of Hayom Yom, previous Rebbe's letter to the Rebbe instructing him what he should do, is in the Rebbe's introduction to Hayom Yom, he quotes the Rebbe's letter. And the instruction the previous Rebbe gave the Rebbe was that the insights should be gathered from the teachings of our Chabad Rebbes. Now, the little insights that are in there come from only one Rebbe, the previous Rebbe. Now, even though officially the instruction could be from many of the Rebbeim, but the Rebbe chose from his Rebbe, so all the quotes come from the previous Rebbe, all the little insights. Now, for whatever reason, on his own, the Rebbe added other things to the book, besides for the daily Hayom Yom. And that is specifically before the Hayom Yom, the Rebbe gives a overview, skira class, an overview of biography of each of the Rebbeim. A little overview of each of their biography. When they're born, what they've accomplished, books they've written, their children, the wife, and all the rest of it. Just like an overview biography. So as time went on, and the new editions of the Hayom Yom, they added the Rebbe's biography. And it was written by Rabbi Zelikson, who's the same. I think I mentioned him. I mentioned how there's like an index of all the Rebbe's talks, and I used that to find the Rebbe's commentary on Sanhedrin, on the Gemara. That's how I find them. So it's the same fellow who wrote this. He's a Chabad historian, archivist almost. So he wrote the Rebbe's biography for the Hayom Yom, and the Rebbe edited it. So the Rebbe didn't write it about himself, but it's edited. So most of the Rebbe's biography is, it goes through the years of his life. Like each entry begins with a year, a date, and then it says a little bit about what the Rebbe had accomplished in that year. So most of it is just what he accomplished. But then, in the second entry, there's a little description about him. And this is very interesting. He came here one year. He came here once for Shabbos. Michal Zelixson came here once for Shabbos. So it says the first entry for the Rebbe, he was born on the 11th of Nisan in 1902, Tafresh Samach Beis, in the city of Nikolaev in Ukraine. Then it says Tafresh Samach Tes, so that's 1909. The Rebbe is 7 years old. Yeah. And here it says he moved his family moved from Nikolaev to Yekaterinslav. This is when the Rebbe's father became the Rav of Yekaterinslav, known as the Petrovsk. And then it talks about how during the summer months, some of the years, the Rebbe would go back to spend the summer with his grandparents, Rebbe and Rachel, back in Nikolaev. And then it says as follows: Loimid b'shkida atzuma, he learns with intense vigor, umatzliach, and is successful. Ba'drachas aviv chakar avagoyna rachasim b'kum b'ren Levi Yitzchak, under the tutelage of his revered father. This is a description of not about his accomplishments, it's a description about him. He learns with intense vigor and is successful under the tutelage of his father. The story goes that, actually Rebbe once talked about one of the teachers that he had, but Rebbe had a teacher in Cheder, and at one point, this was, his teacher in Cheder was, his last name was Valenkin. Can't remember his first name. And at one point, this teacher Valenkin went to the Rebbe's father and said, "Your son knows everything I know. I have nothing more to teach him. Take him back." And so the Rebbe's father guided the Rebbe in his learning. And there was another period when the Rebbe had another teacher during World War I, when Jews were blamed for conspiring with the Germans, they were blamed for the Germans blamed them for conspiring with the Russians, I think.
The Russians
and the Russians and anyway, a lot of refugees were going eastward, away from the war, basically, and a lot of them ended up in Yekaterinslav, where the Rebbe lived, and his father was the Rav, and they were taking care of, the Rebbe's mother, the Rebbe spoke about this actually once, the Rebbe's mother formed a committee to help the refugees and settle them and get them food and get them places to live, etc. And the Rebbe's house itself hosted many people, and there was a famous Rosh Yeshiva, don't remember his name, who was a refugee as well, not a Chabad Rosh Yeshiva, a scholar, and he was employed to be the Rebbe's teacher during that period also. At any rate, so here it said that he learned with great diligence and successful under the tutelage of his father. V'roichesh, and he acquired b'shachar nu'urav, in the dawn of his youth, which means not as a child, but as a very, very young man. It usually means early teens. Shachar nu'urav usually means early teens. Roichesh b'shachar nu'urav, he acquired in the dawn of his youth yediyah, knowledge, b'chol chelkei haTorah, in all parts of Torah. Nigla, revealed part of Torah, v'nistra, and the hidden part of Torah. The next entry, so that was the year 1909, that entry. The next entry is Tafresh Ayin Ches, which is 1918, and it starts talking about dealing with the Polish refugees. That's the next, helping his mother, helping his parents with the refugees. So here's the description of the Rebbe as a young age. Learned diligently and successful under the tutelage of his father, and acquired as a young man knowledge in all parts of Torah. So it's an incredible thing. So the first thing you had is, the first ingredient, if you will, is a childlike faith in Mashiach's coming. And the second ingredient is knowledge in all of Torah. And you could see the knowledge of all of Torah that was writing. There isn't an area in Torah that doesn't quote with sources and proficient knowledge. I mean, see them speak Fabrengens just on a very human level, speaking Fabrengens for 6-7 hours, not one note, and deep insights in like all parts of Torah. In one 5-hour Fabrengen, they could be giving an exposition on in-depth analysis of a Gemara, and then a minute later is giving a deep mimer in Chassidus, deep Kabbalistic theology, and then when he's done, he's giving social commentary on what the American government should do about Israel or Russia or something else. All in span of one Farbrengen with not a note. And in each of these things, I was quoting sources from all over Torah. Ingredient number 2. Ingredient number 3. He never talks about, actually not about himself technically, but it's about himself essentially. And this came during the case with the Svarim, the case with the books. Famous case with the books, where there was nephew, grandson of the previous Rebbe, essentially stole books from the previous Rebbe's library, claiming that the previous Rebbe was just a private individual, and thus when he passes away, the books he amassed are inheritance for his grandkids. And the Rebbe argued that the previous Rebbe is not a private individual. He as a person belongs to the people, and therefore all of his books belong to the people, and thus the library belongs to Agudas Chasidei Chabad, which is the body of Chabad Hasidim, as opposed to a specific individual, himself and his children. Now the opposing side, the nephew's lawyers, argued that when the previous Rebbe's letters and the previous Rebbe's documents say that the library he brought from Russia to America belongs to Agudas Chasidei Chabad, he argued that the previous Rebbe didn't mean it for real. He was just saying it to get a better visa to bring it over. But it wasn't real. And the Rebbe took great offense to this. The notion that his Rebbe could lie, even if it would be permitted because he's saving the books from, but God forbid that the previous Rebbe would ever say something that's not 1,000% true. And to that, the Rebbe wrote the following note.
Yesterday.
Sorry?
We learned that the Gemara yesterday.
Yes, Gemara. Not to switch your words. Yeah. Be straightforward. So the fact that
otherwise it's a way to start.
Yeah, that's the Gemara says there. So to the Rebbe, the idea that his previous Rebbe would say something that's not 100% accurate was an affront and a big chilul Hashem, to quote the Rebbe. Chilul Hashem Hachi Gadola, the greatest chilul Hashem in the words of the Rebbe. So I have here a copy of the Rebbe's handwritten note in response to this thing, and in it he describes what a Rebbe is, and therefore describing how it's impossible for a Rebbe to say something that's not 100% true. So even though he's talking about the previous Rebbe, but he opens up the line by saying, like all Chabad Rebbes. And thus it would be clear that the Rebbe is talking about his own function as a Rebbe. So if you will, we have the Rebbe describing himself as a young child, this faith in Mashiach's coming, which kept him going all the way through, this childlike faith in Mashiach's coming. A little bit older, Shachar Ne'ura, of the dawn of his youth, acquiring knowledge of all of Torah, and now describing himself as a Rebbe. And the Rebbe writes like this: K'chol Admei Chabad, like all Chabad Rebbes, Hayesod Hardishan, the first foundation is Bittul Hayesh, is complete self-nullification, Maskal Ba'atzmai, beginning with himself, Ba'amitis, truthfully self-surrender. Next paragraph. So the first foundation is complete self-surrender. Next paragraph. More, considering that he's a Rebbe, Harei a shlichus, this is a mission, nafshis, a soul mission, v'ikris, and the word ikris is underlined, a primary soul mission. Lenahalim, to guide them or to lead them, and to encourage them, referring to his flock. But Torah mitzvahs b'chlal, and Torah mitzvahs in general, and then in parentheses, beginning with faith in Hashem, following Shulchan Aruch, etc. Ulaharoisam, and to show the people, dugma chaya, a living example. The word chaya is underlined. Bazeh, in this. Meaning to say, the Rebbe's primary job is influencing them in fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs, beginning with him showing a living example. So, if that's the case, then the previous Rebbe's primary function, or the Rebbe's primary function, is to follow the full code of Jewish laws and everything that's in it. And thus, even the notion of saying something not true is appalling. And then it puts in parentheses. To show them a living example in this, in serving Hashem properly. Parentheses, quote, Ad kedei misiras nefesh, until the point of giving up his life, bepoil, in reality. And the word bepoil is underlined. The function is to show the people a living example of following Shulchan Aruch to the point of giving up his life. In other words, it's not just a moment of giving up your life, but every moment of the Rebbe living in leading his people, he's living with the notion that everything he's doing now, he's ready to give up his life for. Pshita, and therefore it's obvious, lishlel, that we negate, kol pula, any action, sheyuchlu litos, that in some way could be mistakenly interpreted as the opposite. So even something that could be interpreted as the opposite of Shulchan Aruch is absolutely mufrach, is completely out of the question for a Rebbe. He's willing to give up his life for that. La'acher is underlined. After that, Bayim comes chayav b'sor prati, his life as an individual, underlined prati. The gamba zen, even in this, his private life, yisoid, the foundation, the word foundation underlined. Shaloi negei klal, that it doesn't affect at all is underlined. B'tafkidoi hakloli, in his general role, v'ha'ikri, in his primary role underlined. So even his private life, which comes after his readiness to give up his life for leading his people and living by example, even his private life will never come even at all in the way of his primary function of being ready to give up his life as a Rebbe. So just to add, I don't have a text for this, but I had two stories related to this statement of the Rebbe willing to take on the role as a Rebbe and being ready to give everything up for his leadership and following the Code of Jewish, giving up his life to follow the Code of Jewish laws and encourage his followers to do the same. One story is I heard from a friend of mine's father, and I confirmed it with Rabbi Steinsaltz, who the story happened with. And the short story is, he once told the Rebbe that he has, I don't know the number, let's say 5 projects for the year. 5 projects he wants to get done. Steinsaltz has a project. It's a project. It's not it's a real project. And he tells the Rebbe about his projects. And the Rebbe tells him, that's beautiful. I actually had in mind other projects for you. So now he has a total of 10 projects. The ones he had in mind, and then the ones the Rebbe just gave him. Sometimes later, he sees the Rebbe, and the Rebbe asks him how the projects are coming along. And he tells the Rebbe, can't do it. If you know Steinsaltz, he's a straightforward person, doesn't mince words, and he's going to be honest with the Rebbe. He's not a chassid in the classic sense of a chassid. He's a different kind of chassid. Sorry.
No coding.
No coding. Absolutely no coding. And he tells the Rebbe, sorry, I can't do the projects. I just can't do it. It's not because he was sleeping too much. He can't do them. It's because he can't do them. He just can't. So there's a lot going on. He's running his institutions. He's running his this, and plus he's publishing books and whatever else, and these projects. So Rebbe get very serious. Rebbe tells him, what, you think I could be Rebbe? I have to do it, so I'm doing it. That's one story. A similar thing happened to another individual named Herbert Wiener. I think it was Herbert Wiener, whom the Rebbe basically told him that it's like Herbert Wiener is a conservative, America's conservative rabbi who later became Orthodox. The Rebbe encouraged him to become Orthodox. Okay. And he wrote a book called 9.5 Mystics. One of the 9.5, it's about 9 different mystics. One of the 9 mystics is actually Steinsaltz, and another one of the 9 mystics is the Rebbe. So he describes it, I think it's in that book, if I'm not mistaken. It could be it's a different interview, but I'm pretty sure it's Herbert Wiener who writes this. That the Rebbe tells him that it's like a key to a library that's been put in his pocket, and he has it. In other words, like he has the role of being Rebbe, and he just has the role. And similarly, in last week's Living Torah, there's a woman who said a similar thing. You saw last week's Living Torah? There's a woman who was doing Mr. B'Shabbos. She was doing like groups. Actually, on Sunday, she was doing youth groups on Sunday for kids who weren't in Jewish schools, I think. And if I'm not mistaken, and it was in last week's Living Torah. And she felt like she was doing too much, and she wrote to the Rebbe, I want to quit. It's too hard. I can't do it. No one's helping me. And the Rebbe tells her, what should the Rebbe say? She's like, what do you mean? She said, well, nobody's helping the Rebbe in his job, and he's doing it anyway. So she was like, the Rebbe speaks to you like that, you can't quit. So she did it for another year or two, whatever it was. But this idea, I'm adding it to this point here, where the Rebbe is willing to give up everything to be Rebbe. The Rebbe did so. Literally, give up everything to be a Rebbe. So when you have these 3 ingredients together, a childlike faith, period, but certainly in the coming of Mashiach, which as we've been describing in the last classes, is the culmination of everything. It's a faith in the Jews' neshama, it's a faith in the value of a mitzvah and building Mashiach's reality. A childlike faith that runs through all the way into his adult life.
Solid foundation, built on that knowledge and all of Torah, proficient knowledge in all of Torah, and then coupled with that, complete, full dedication to the point of giving up his life for the service of Hashem and the service of the people. Tenacity.
That is a little bit of who the Rebbe is in his own words. So for those who are going to the oil, safe travels. Have us all in mind. Those who are staying here, we look forward to Febrengen and sharing more over Shabbos.
Go safe.